Okay, roll call.
Chisel. Neal.
Here.
Olson.
Here.
Luce. Here. Zittergruen.
Here.
Hadley. Here. Johnson.
Here.
Okay, is there anybody here who wants to speak to the council that is an item that is not on the agenda? Seeing none. Consent agenda.
Item A, minutes of the January 24, 2022 work session and February 7, 2022 minutes. Item B, claims. Item C, tax abatement for Travis Mossman, 506 Mossman Drive, new construction. Item D, renewal of Class C liquor license with outdoor service and Sunday sales for the Winship County Fair. Item E, renewal of Class C liquor license pending dram shop for Your Place.
Could I just ask a quick question? I haven't seen the language dram shop before. Does that refer to something specific?
It's insurance, so that if they're providing to somebody and they get in an accident after the fact.
Okay,
Move to approve.
Second.
moved by Olson, seconded by Luce. Any further discussion? Roll call.
Olson.
Aye.
Luce.
Aye.
Chisel. Neal.
Aye.
Zittergruen.
Aye.
Hadley.
Aye.
Johnson.
Aye.
Decor Historic Preservation Annual Report, Mark Mugley.
Because Decorah is a CLG, a certified local government, the city's Historic Preservation Commission is required to give an annual report of its activities to the council. The cumbersomely organized written report is in your meeting folder, and this is the required oral summary. And afterwards, I'll give the mayor the required sheet that she needs to sign to say that I was here. I'm afraid that because so many of our projects are long-term, these annual reports end up blurring together. In 2020, we brought the exciting news that we had completed our work on the Luther College Campus Historic District nomination. But because the nomination was accepted by the National Park Service only in March 2021, I get to tell you tonight that the project is actually complete. Similarly, I've mentioned a number of times over the years that we've been working on a boundary increase of the Broadway Phelps Park District in order to include the St. Benedict Church and Public Library. Now I can say that our work was completed in 2021, even though the Park Service won't act on the nomination until March of this year, and I'll get to mention that again in February 2023. I've also over the years often mentioned that we were continuing to work on a project to catalog and celebrate the work of architect engineer Charles Offelish, who designed this building, among many others. Well, we're getting close. The Chamber of Commerce staff are nearly finished laying out the printed brochure listing over 60 of his properties. That brochure is funded by a grant from the hotel motel tax. And Corey Peterson at iRock Webs is nearing completion of the much more expansive web contents. We're hoping this model of modest price brochure with expansive but revisable web contents might work for some of our other projects instead of, in other words, expensive books. In 2021, we also filled a request to create illustrated guidelines for C3 design, sign, and mural applications. Greg Swanson has been very helpful in making these available to all permit applicants. We have recently started looking ahead towards how we can contribute to Decorah's 175th anniversary in 2024. In addition to these long-term projects, we continue with our regular activities, including our annual Historic Preservation Award and responding to questions about particular properties. In a similar vein, we continue to provide our responses to all C3 permit applications. We have found this to be interesting work, and we hope these reports are helpful to Planning and Zoning Board of Adjustment and the Council. In 2020, P and Z and the council delegated authority for sign permits to the zoning administrator, but we continue, as was agreed at the time, to provide our responses to Greg before he acts on those sign applications. Before I close, I want to acknowledge the excellent work of my fellow commission members, Mark Branham, Adrian Coffin, Haley Jackson, Judy Vanderlinden, Diane Scholl, and Karen Josem. I promised myself that I would report on 2021 without using the words pandemic, COVID, vaccine, or mask, so I'd better stop here. Thanks for your support.
I want to, first of all, acknowledge the work that your group does and the level of professionalism that you bring to that. I also want to just pass on to the council that Mark presented a very interesting program at Rotary last week on the project with the Oftalage, and it was really informative and very interesting.
Thank you.
Anything else from any of the council people?
I'll just say that in watching occasional planning and zoning commissions, I do appreciate very much the feedback that you give and the work that you do to put that board in a position to make as good of a decision as it can. I know they haven't always aligned with your group's perspective, but having that background it's been good to see them informed by that perspective as well. So thank you.
Thank you.
And do you have the one page for my signature?
Except for the signature.
I also wanted to commend you guys on your work with researching Charles Dolflish. He was a neighbor of mine over there on the west side. And I know he did some phenomenal work up at Luther and several of the houses and buildings around Decorah. So I commend you guys for doing that.
We should have interviewed you. Well, some good stories.
Well, I could tell you some good ones.
Oh.
He was a good neighbor. Yeah, good neighbor.
They'll be coming your way.
It's pretty dangerous in the mayor to just be putting her signature on a blank line.
I actually read what that line said. So
When you come back and ask for those funds, we're going to say no.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
thank you very much. Power purchase agreement presentation by John Nielsen of Perry Novak Electric. Authorization of city staff to create a power purchase agreement for council consideration. Do you want to give background on this?
John has presented to Sustainability Commission and given some conceptual numbers on potential cost savings to the city if installations were to be put at the campground and also at the street shop. Myself and Jeremy Brill did meet with John to talk about PPAs and a little bit more in detail on what those might include. And my understanding is that the actual agreements themselves are fairly confidential and usually negotiated between the city and the investor. And historically, as John has done them, it's been the council that has authorized staff or the mayor in smaller communities to negotiate those. And so without able to review documents, myself or John, to make a recommendation on entering into and signing a PPA, that's why John's here tonight to walk through and get council's input on what they would want to see negotiated and potentially authorize staff to draft one.
Okay, I do have some questions, but I'll wait to hear from your report.
Yep. So this started with meeting with the Sustainability Committee, and they asked us to look at the city's electric utilities bills and where we could possibly look at solar. And so if you look at that first page inside there, it's kind of a summary of some of the sites. And I left some of them on there just to kind of let you see that you don't pay the same kilowatt rate on each site, even though we're not putting solar on those sites. And that's why I left that on there. But as we met with that Sustainability Committee, it came up with a feasible option looking at 3 different locations. So those 3 locations are the street committee building, the campground, the main campground, And then also the Twin Springs campground, which is 2 different meters. We would, in a sense, put it in one location that would feed both of those campgrounds. We did, throughout the last couple of months, look at the long-term campground park or area. It's fed not with Alliant, it's fed with My Energy. Due to the distance and the reduced rate that they have, it didn't make sense to look at a PPA option for them at this time. A little bit about those and how that works with the PPA. So PPA stands for Power Purchase Agreement. And what that means to you guys is you buy power from an investor and typically at a reduced rate. So if you're paying 18 cents and the investor agrees to sell it to you for 10 cents, then your savings is that difference. And that rate can be initially negotiated between the investor and the city initially. We typically enter into a 25-year agreement. I have a lot of cities that will say, you know what, we want to do that as a 25-year standard agreement, but we want to try and buy it out at year 10 or year 8 or wherever that magic number that they think they can raise the funds to do it. But you also have some sites that they've outright determined that they probably will never buy it out, and they'll continue to use that investor for the whole life of that 25-year contract. So they are written to have that option if the city chooses to never buy that out. If you don't, at the end of that 25 years, they are written to continue on a yearly basis until the city would tell the investor to pull that system out. So in theory, you could keep it 40 years. If it's functioning at 38 years, it can continue to function.
How often do you negotiate rate?
What's that?
How often is rate negotiated, or is it beginning and
it continues on an escalator for that entire 25 years. Okay. Yep. We work very closely with the city or entity. If it's right now we're doing a system in Almaquee for the county for Almaquee. We work closely with the city to try and find what I call friend of the industry. So we try and find a local investor that if you guys come to us and say, hey, you want to try and buy this out in year 10, we'll work closely with you to give you the best buyout price that they can. We do have a couple local investors at this point that I think would be a good fit for Decorah that are tied to Decorah. And so at some point, if the city was interested in doing that, we'd visit with them and see if they'd be willing to take the project. So the other pages after the summary page in here kind of let you see how the solar will work. So you're going to have some months in the city's budget where the solar is going to overproduce, and it's going to bank those credits. So if you currently don't have solar yourself, that's how it works. So in the months you overproduce, you pay the investor. Alliant will still bank those credits on the city's bill, and then you use those up throughout the winter months when it doesn't produce enough. The back page is like on the next one for the street department. We'll show you what it would roughly look like on the roof of that building. And the street department, you're saving roughly about $1,600 a year. And then the campground together is a little over 8. So altogether is about 10,000 between the 3 sites. And if you look at the next 2 pages, it'll show you on the back what that site would look like above the campground. We are looking at the site, which would be kind of across from where Luther College's windmill is on the top of that hill up above the campground.
And so this estimate does not include the My Energy portion.
Does not include which portion?
The portion of the campground that's fueled by My Energy.
Correct. I'm sorry, yeah, the long term, it does not. Okay. Yep. Yeah, it just did not make sense.
Nope.
Because they're at a reduced rate or lower rate than Alliant is. And it's kind of interesting.
I know you've put a lot of work into this, and I know sustainability has reviewed it, and I appreciate the amount of slog that you did to get our meter data. I know that it was a challenge to come up with a proposal that's clearly based on our long-term usage and whatnot.
Yep.
And I appreciate the fact that it's a local company and a potentially local investor. So thank you.
I do want to add sustainability on Wednesday at their meeting last week did make a recommendation. And Jim is on the line if we want to hear from Jim. They made a recommendation to support the project with one abstention. If Jim wants to report out or if you want to, but I want to bring that to everyone's attention.
I do have some questions, and I know I don't know what your involvement with Park and Rec was. I was at the Park and Recreation meeting, and they had several questions, and I know the general aspect is they do want to work towards that, but there were questions as far as the location and stuff. Andy, do you want to bring forth some of the concerns from the Park and Recreation Board? If that's not working, then I'll have you come up here. Or questions, I should say, not so much concerns. No, then, well, they both would be equal probably, but I'd like to hear from.
So yeah, and John gave this presentation to the park board at the January meeting, and for sure, to be clear, the park board is very excited about doing solar at the campground and definitely wants to do that. Also want to recognize that Novak Electric, Perry, has done almost all of our electrical work out there and been there on a minute's notice, and we are, very happy with them. So when we have questions, it's not about Novak Electric at all. And the questions don't really go into the PPA and just the workings of that. The questions are, is that the right place to put the solar field? We were not in on the original conversations. I don't know if the park board talked about 3 other locations right next to the campground that they like the sites better, but we weren't in on any of the conversations. So I don't want to bring up stuff that shouldn't be talked about tonight. Our questions are those types of things, not on a PPA. It's yes, we want to be involved with solar. Does this take into account for growth if right now we have a campground full of 30 amp sites? Everybody wishes it was 50 amp sites. If we are doing that in the next 5 years, does this take that into account? Can we grow? So, I mean, I don't want to get into all these details if they don't matter right now, but those are the things we just want to make sure all that planning took place and as part of a bigger discussion, not just get solar at the campground right now to save $8,600 a year. Just want to make sure all these things are taken into account.
Well, they also made a comment that the hideaway is not covered, and that's where, what was it, 23% of your electricity is in the hideaway?
Correct.
But that's
Correct.
with my energy, so they pay a lower rate already.
Yep.
Yeah. So,
Right.
So we can't.
So,
I mean, there's.
Another thing I can tell you, Andy, like if you would have your demand go up because of more 50 amp pedestals in the future, I can only go so much. I can't put in 50% more than your current demand. Alliant wouldn't allow me to do that at this point and get net metering. So
right,
if that
right.
would change in the next 12 months, that'd be different.
Sure.
But if it's 5 or 10 years down the road, I can't put that
Yeah.
in.
And already the city's starting to look at where the first vehicle plug-in station is going to be. 10 years from now, do we need to have them at the campground? I don't know. Maybe. I would say that we have a great campground, one of the best around, and hopefully 10 years from now, we want to be one of the best around, and 20 years, we want to be one of the best around. Just want to make sure this plans for all those types of things. Just don't want to shoestring us for later or something. So
If I may,
Go ahead.
John, hate to put you on the spot, but so what are we talking? 50 campsites that are currently at 30 amp and looking to upgrade to 50 amp. My understanding is that like Winnebago just came out with an all electric RV, and we're starting to see some. where I'm gonna put you on the spot is, what do you think if we were to upgrade everything to a 50 amp service? Let's start there. Can you ballpark me what we'd see? Okay.
No, I don't even know how you do that because you don't know how much they're going to use it per day. I mean,
can you go through the process in terms of how did you come up with this site? Have you looked at the other two sites? I mean, I don't know the answer to those questions either, so I guess I would be interested.
Yeah, it all is based off your kilowatt hour demand at this point. I mean, like I said, if all of a sudden 5 years from now your demand went up 20%, there's two ways to look at it. You know that all of a sudden you could potentially try and put in more, or you know that now we're doing, I think, about 105%, because I can put in a little bit more than your demand. And so we did put in a little more than what your demand was, knowing that usage isn't going to go down. You'd know that down the road, you're only going to be able to do 80% of your load at that point. You just, do you want to put in more 5 years to get to that 100% again, or do you just want to go, we're powering, the solar's producing 80% of our load? It becomes that question at that point.
And Andy, is to your question, in talking with Jim, and Jim, I know you're on the line, so you can discuss it more if you have to, but we realized the fact that there was potential growth and electrical upgrades needed, and space needs change, but that site up above wasn't allocated for parkland. You've got Carlson Park that's still in development and whatnot. It would be a long time before that upper pulpit plane would come into play for anything. And to be able to take the campground off grid and have room to expand, even in the future with 50 amp production, there's room. You can't overbuild for capacity now because of net metering. They won't allow you to overbuild. So we've been looking at this for 3 years, and I know that many of us have gone on a beacon and have looked at all the different sites, both in and out of the floodplain, that can hit this meter. So as much as I appreciate the park board's reserve and whatnot, sometimes I think we just need to move forward with something that's out of the way and expandable. And if you come back and say in your budgets that 50 amp upgrades are in there, then we can go back to John and say, John, we want to look at extending our PPA to expand to meet new need. But if we continue waiting, the cost of all supplies and everything will also continue to keep going up. So I think that there's a point at which council just needs to take action to achieve an energy goal, if it's not hampering something in the way or an immediate project. I think we've done a lot of thinking, and I know the mayor likes to think and discuss and talk about feelings and everything like that, but we've had sustainability review this. We've had the park board talk about this, and they're on board for solar. I just don't think that we can wait a whole lot longer to take action on something when we know that pricing is increasing, raw materials and the cost of energy. I would ask that the council support this to move forward.
You know, first of all, I didn't even know what a power purchase agreement was. Right. So my question is how flexible is a power purchase? Or is it actually, you only get that for just what you're stating? So let's say you did put another, array someplace else. Then do you have to do another power purchase agreement for another place?
Yep.
Okay,
If you did another system 3 years from now, you would enter into another agreement.
Okay, so
actually, all we're talking about is the things in the folder.
Because I had
even if you added on to an existing facility, you would it would be a new agreement for those new solar panels.
Yeah, you could potentially do an amendment possibly to the current one if you were just to add on to that site. We could visit with the lawyer about doing that, but potentially you do a new agreement just for that add-on.
I mean, one way to look at this is just that we're gonna, however many kilowatts of electricity this is, I don't know. However
saving
many
$10,000.
millions of kilowatt electricity this is, we are about to, if we enter into this agreement, we lower the cost we're gonna pay for those kilowatt hours for 25 years. In a time when we know that rates will continue to go up with Alliant, we know that the cost of energy is going to continue to go up. And so we've essentially locked in a fixed rate for our electrical use for the street department and for the campground. And that surface level, to me, it seems like a good deal. I understand the park's concern about trying to figure out how to expand, but I also hear Ross and the commission and in my own mind, that's a long way down the road. And I do think that this seems to be the best site of them. And I feel like we should move ahead with this project, knowing that we can add solar panels to 50 if we need to increase the amperage. And there are other spaces we could think about campgrounds.
In the design phase moving forward, as we're working with people, we can look at other sites throughout that process if it makes sense. I have driven out there and I've looked at shading, and I know when my energy side came up, there were some questions about some other property out there across the highway, and there's just too much shading where they were talking then too. So due to where that is, there's a lot of shading in that area. So.
What do you need from the council to move forward? Like, what do we need to be deciding?
So typically what we ask for is a council to approve either the mayor or a city administrator to approve moving forward with a concept pending no major changes. So unless all of a sudden something happens that you're only going to save half of what we presented, that we get started on the draft and the documents to go back to the mayor and the city administrator to review, to give to your attorney, working with the attorney that we use out of the cities that does all of our PPA agreements.
Just one other question as far as how it works.
Yep.
Is there, I mean, how does that work with the type of current electricity that they've got set up? That's kind of an archaic piece. Is there any need to adjust that? Would there be any reason once you put in to have to change any of the current electricity setup that's out there?
No, we tie into the current services that are there.
Okay.
I'd just like to make one more point to kind of support what Ross was saying, and that is that there's an additional reason for the time of this. I mean, in addition to the fact that we're basically throwing money away every month when we could be saving money every month, there's an additional reason, which is that the tax credits that make this a really good deal for the investor, that creates that wiggle room where we can pay less for power and the investor can make money, make some return. Those tax credits are scheduled to expire. And I don't have a lot of faith that the Iowa legislature is planning to renew them. I mean, they might, but we shouldn't count on that. And I think it'd be savvy, you know, as much as I can appreciate the desire to sort of future-proof the system or build for what we plan to do long-term, especially if we can expand the capacity at the campground to match our future growth plans via an additional PPA or an amendment. I think the time to strike is now. I might suggest that we maybe encourage 2 separate PPAs unless that would magnify the cost. That way we could consider the concerns of the Parks and Rec Board, carefully as we discuss that other PPA. But I also support giving Travis and John discretion to pursue a contract within the general parameters of what's been presented tonight.
What would be the purpose for having 2?
Well, only that way if Parks and Rec came with an amazing objection and we wouldn't be torpedoing the streets department piece of it by holding off on building out the Parks department part of it. I think Andy's comments deserve a good hearing.
What he said about if you're going to build someplace else, you just do another PPP, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think we can still make one power purchase agreement, and then if we need to amend it, we can. So I would make a recommendation that we.
There are there are concepts though, if I remember correctly, that we need to have council discuss. Does council intend on buying these out? So as these figures are presented, that is purely lease, and again, this agreement has to be structured that is purely a lease, but can have a buyout option at the end to pay fair market value. It has to be, it cannot be a determined amount because then it turns into a lease purchase agreement. Those are not allowed. But if council wishes for us to own them, at what point is that? 10 years down the road, 5 years down the road, never intend on owning them. We just want to lease and observe this cost savings.
Did sustainability have a recommendation on that?
Yeah, I would actually ask Jim, because I know Luther has one set that they will own and one they will not. And Jim,
yeah, sure. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yep, that'd be great.
Sure. That the question that I'm not sure who raised it. Anna Anderson, the city attorney. Can you still hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Sorry, I had something happen here. That's not an issue that you have to decide today. The power, and John can speak to this, I'm sure, the power purchase agreement will provide that as an option as part of the contract. The city, as I think John said, can continue to purchase power from the system, from the investor for the full life of the contract, which I think is a 25-year contract. Or at some point, the city can exercise its option to purchase the system at a fair market value. Normally that process for determining fair market value is included in the power purchase agreement, not the price, but the process to determine the price. But again, there's nothing in and this is a power purchase agreement. It is not a lease. In a lease, the entity that leases the equipment bears all the risk and responsibility for its operation. In a power purchase agreement, the entity that owns the system, the investor, bears the responsibility for making sure it works. All the city is doing is buying electricity. Just the other thing to say is remember that this system is going to be interconnected with the Alliant Energy lines that serve the campground and the streets department. These solar arrays are not the exclusive provider of electricity to these facilities. When the sun isn't shining, you need electricity to come from somewhere. So the campground, the streets department will continue to be served by Alliant Energy, but a portion of the energy that is consumed at both locations will be coming from these solar arrays. So if the campground expands, if you need 50 amp service instead of 40 or 30, excuse me, well, that's fine. The Alliant system will be designed to provide that power. These electrons from the solar array simply supplement that and provide an opportunity for some cost savings. Finally, Steve Zittergrun is correct. The clock is ticking on the tax credits, the federal tax credits. They dropped from 26% at the end of this year to 22% next year, and then to 10%. So it's a narrow window to get something like this done. Unfortunately, steel prices are going up. So I think for various reasons, it is an opportune time to move ahead with this project, assuming that the city manager and the city attorney both agree that this power purchase agreement, the terms thereof, are in the financial interests of the city of Decorah, as well as its broader sustainability goals, which include reducing greenhouse gas emissions.
Understand that. John, do you have questions or comments? Or?
No, not at this time. I might have a question that we have to consult with bond counsel about it, since the city is obligating itself basically to 25 years. But we can work that out. I mean, it's not a showstopper by any means. It's just one of the things we'd have to work through.
So I guess I would make a recommendation. Well, Steve made the recommendation. I would second it, that we ask city staff and mayor to negotiate a power purchase agreement with Perry Novak.
That's fine, but I do think we owe Travis an answer to his request for direction. My expression of preference would be we shoot for maybe like a 10-year buyout, and that I'd love it if we could structure this so that our savings were escrowed to fund that buyout at the end of 10 years. I mean, if we're saving 5 cents per kilowatt hour, I'd love to make sure that we're earmarking that money for an eventual buyout of the system.
I guess I had one question too. When we talk about this project, does that include both the campground and the street department all in the same project? Okay.
Yes, it does.
So my understanding though, from what Jim said, is we don't actually have to decide whether or not we're gonna buy them out. You can just put that in the power purchase agreement.
But the wording will be in there.
Yeah.
You have an option starting at year 7 typically. And then, yeah, you could do it at 10. So it's structured to have multiple options, multiple timelines to buy it out. And then, yes, we do actually have a wording in our PPA to have an escrow account.
At the end
as
of
your council changes over years, if you put that money aside, it's still there.
I'm sorry, at the end of 20 years or so, solar panels do start to lose some of their capacity.
Yep.
At what point do they, after 20 years, at what point are they, you better off just to take them out and put new panels up at 20 years or 25 years or 30?
The panels are warranted for 30 years. They have a lifespan of 35 to 40 before they'll get to that point.
Okay.
So that'll be the point. If you wouldn't buy it, that'd be where you'd at some point look at what the savings is and possibly look at the investor and say, we need to talk about upgrading or pulling it out.
Okay. Thank you.
Cost of construction.
It's not.
Doesn't matter because we're just buying power.
We just
Okay,
are buying power.
Gary,
We're
do you
not-
have a motion down?
No.
I would move that we authorize the city staff to work with Perry Novak to develop a purchase agreement, a PPA.
I'll second.
Motion made by Steve Luce, seconded by Steve Zittiger.
I do
Any
have-
further discussion?
I've got a couple of questions here because I'm not well versed in solar, and I'll admit that. Now, you said there's increasing rates throughout the time of this. Is that because of increased input costs?
It's a combination of, excuse me, the fact that it produces a little bit less and it costs the investor more over time to be able to insurance rates and everything else over time.
So they are insuring these since they're not city owned?
Yep.
Okay, that was my second.
There's just a small escalator in there to go up every year.
One more, if we put it like on the roof at the street department, or if we do this building and end up with one here, and we need to do maintenance on said roof, who is responsible for dismantling those and then reinstalling them? Is that the investor, or does that drop back onto the city?
If you'd have to do maintenance, so let's say you had damaged that roof from a storm or something else, then that would be on the city at that point. So we would verify the roof is capable of taking that before we put it on.
Right, but if a hole gets poked through it and we have to take the panels off to repair it, those aren't our panels.
They probably got damaged too, right?
Well, I'm just looking at the hypotheticals.
Yeah.
If there's something, if the panels are fine and they didn't cause the damage to the roof,
Then it would be
we
the
gotta repair
city's,
something in
under
the
that
roof.
situation, it would be the city's responsibility if it wasn't something the investor did.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Roll call?
Luce,
Yes.
Zittergren,
Yes.
Neal,
Yes.
Olson,
Yes.
Hadley,
Yes.
Johnson,
Yes.
Chisel.
Aye.
Motion carried. Thank you for your presentation.
Thanks.
Consider 2022 and 2023 rural fire contract. I know we had a meeting prior.
Okay.
Should we table this until?
Well, I believe the terms have still remained the same. It's just the price point. And I know this is one thing I'd like to get off my checklist that's, I think, been here since a year ago. But so fiscal year 22, which again begins July 1, 2021, contract amount for 40,000. Fiscal year 23, which begins July 1, 22, is for 44,000. And fiscal year 24 agreed to adjust by, which again, July 1, 2023, would adjust by the CPI from January to January of the preceding year. And we would add calendar dates to the rest of this document to avoid confusion of simply saying fiscal year 22, fiscal year 23, and then fiscal 24.
So does this expire then at the end of fiscal year 24.
Correct.
And
At
we'd
the
have
end
to
of fiscal
renegotiate another one?
24, we
Okay.
would renegotiate.
Okay.
I guess the question is if you want to approve it or wait till the,
I would like to see it
everything
all
written
all
out?
the amendments done to it and update the rural fire people also and discuss this at the next meeting.
Well, we just had that meeting, that this has been discussed and approved by rural fire. So we just
But we gotta
changed what
make
we wrote.
amendments here plus the people
Well,
association. I would like to see it amended and brought back. I mean, it's 2 weeks.
Is that a motion or not? Because if not,
I would move to table and make the amendments and bring it back at our March 1st meeting or whatever March is.
okay, we have a motion to table and bring it back to the March, I think it's 7th meeting. Looking for a second. I don't get a second. Motion fails.
Move to accept the amended or whatever, the 2022, et cetera, on fire agreement.
Second.
Motion made by Steve Luce, seconded by Olson to accept the contract as described. I'll put it that way. Any further discussion?
I think it's good that we're moving to a fixed, I guess, moving to the CPI as the metric by which we evaluate the annual increase, because this has been a tendentious conversation the 2 times that I've been part of it. And I'd like to, have, I guess, meetings with lower temperatures. That said, long-term, it's my personal, kind of conviction that number should be significantly higher than it is. When you look at the percentage of calls to our fire department that leave our city limits and compare that to the percentage of our fire department's income that comes from the rural areas that we serve, there's still quite a misalignment. And I think it'd be good and fair for the citizens, both of our city and of our wider service area to bring those numbers more in line with how the service is provided.
Any further discussion?
I would suggest we do pass this and we look at the period of which it's in duration to use time to begin to talk about those desired updates. So it's not again a last thing to, oh, we got to get this done tonight.
we have been negotiating it for like 3 years.
I know.
Is there?
So,
All right. Is there any further discussion?
No.
Roll call.
Luce.
Aye.
Olson.
Aye.
Zittergruen.
Aye.
Hadley.
Aye.
Johnson.
Aye.
Chisel. Neal.
Aye.
Motion carried. Consider MEU recommendation and IUB response. Travis?
Okay, so the MEU task force met last week on Thursday. Carly's going to give most of this update. I unfortunately wasn't able to attend last. I say unfortunately, but I had a good time. I was on vacation last week, but so Carly's going to give most of the update. But task force met on Thursday, as council's aware. On Friday, we received notice that Alliant had declined to participate in the meeting that IUB had requested. And so take it away, Carly.
So here I am to give you an update. So on February 1st, I gave you an overall update of what we've been doing, what the MEU task force has been doing. So indeed, as Travis just mentioned, since then, on February 11th, the Iowa Utilities Board responded to the city's request for information from Alliant with a proposed meeting between the city of Decorah, Alliant, the IUB, and the Office of Consumer Affairs. That was a meeting that was going to be scheduled in early March. So last Thursday, February 17th, the MEU task force met to discuss the recommendation that has been shared with you. And so that was part of the materials for this meeting. Is there any need for me to read the recommendation? I'm seeing no's. All right. So the task force is recommending a modest funding level. We secured grant funds to offset the costs, and we will return to council to discuss any additional steps as they arise. The following afternoon, then on Friday, February 18th, Alliant responded to the Iowa Utilities Board that they will not be participating in that proposed meeting. From the perspective of the task force, it's unfortunate that Alliant declined the IUB's invitation to have this conversation. The IUB is the agency responsible for regulating monopolies like Alliant. It will be up to the IUB to determine how to respond to Alliant's rejection of this invitation from the agency that regulates them. But in the meantime, we do think it would be in the city's best interest to begin a conversation with experienced legal counsel so that we can be prepared for whatever next steps the IUB determines are appropriate. So we have our recommendation. The recommendation that we prepared stands. I would like to end with 3 sentences from the city's November letter to the IUB as a reminder for why we've been asking for information from Alliant in the first place. And so this is in the letter that's in the task force Dropbox. Decorah's task force cannot complete its charge of conducting a feasibility study and making a recommendation to the city council without accurate information. The city council cannot make an informed decision on holding a referendum without accurate information. A community cannot have an informed debate, and the citizens cannot make informed decisions on how to vote without accurate information. We are simply reiterating our request to try to get the information that we need from Alliant. So I'm happy to answer any questions.
I think the amount that we talked about as far as potentially was about $7,500. Looking at the fact that you've got a grant that's got matching funds with it, and also the money that sustainability currently has for that.
Indeed. So the recommendation that was in the materials for this meeting, the recommendation is up to and not to exceed $7,500 to be approved for council. 32% of that is reimbursable by the USDA grant that we already acquired for this purpose, which would leave the city with roughly up to and probably less than $5,000 in expenses.
So I'm really excited. I think this is exactly what is needed. I really want to thank the task force for the letter. I am also saddened that Alliant is choosing not to attend this meeting, but I think it is a very unique opportunity and something the IUB has not given before for us to have a good conversation about what the barriers are for communities in terms of municipalization. At that meeting, I'm hoping that we can get answers in terms of what would depreciation look like? So there are many things that the Iowa Utility Board could do to lower the barrier so that we're not risking what is it somewhat of an insurmountable risk, right? I mean, we don't want to spend the amount of money that we've been told we need to go to a board and be denied. But with the Iowa Utilities Board's understanding of what's at stake for a community, hopefully they can provide the roadmap that will take that off the table, and we won't be looking at that when we make the choice whether or not to pursue municipalization. So I'm really excited by the prospect of going to the utility board. I think it's really important for us to have that conversation, for the Office of Consumer Advocate to also hear our concerns, and hopefully with our information, again, we don't need the numbers from Alliant as much as we need the formulas and the understanding from the Iowa Utility Board in terms of what is at stake if we go for municipalization. So I think it's money well spent. It's a question that is lingering. It's something we've tasked our Sustainability Commission with. We've put an MEU task force out there. I feel like this is a reasonable cost for the very next step of figuring out where does the Iowa Utility Board sit with helping us in municipalization.
Other comments from other council people, please?
Where does it end? How many thousands of dollars will we spend going forward after this?
Oh,
go ahead.
I was just gonna say, we did specifically put a not to exceed number on this, and it will be up to the council to determine that as it goes forward. I think it was a really good sign that the IUB suggested that we meet. I think that was a good sign that they were taking our issues seriously, and there was a chance that they would consider this request, and they wanted to get to the bottom of it. So I don't have an answer other than we would definitely obviously come back to the council, and this would be something that the council would clearly have more opportunities to review. We're not asking for a blank check here.
Didn't our referendum in 2018 state not to pursue by the outcome of the vote?
The referendum that lost by 3 votes.
Well, yeah.
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 With,
but that was saying the community does not want to pursue an MEU.
Yep. And the law does allow for cities to reconsider this. And the fact that Alliant raised rates immediately after that referendum did leave many people thinking that maybe they had been misled and were willing to investigate this issue further.
Yeah, I personally know more than 3 people who would have changed their vote if they'd known the rate change that was coming. So that doesn't reflect, necessarily the current will of the city on the matter.
There were more than 3 people who wrote to the Iowa Utility Board saying they could vote again, wish they could. So, I mean, I don't think that, I think that's a moot point. I mean, you think about bond referendums for schools that fail all the time. If our fire station referendum fails, we're going to turn around to do it again. I mean, there's a certain amount of community-wide referendums often fail their first time and often pass their second or third time. So it's not an argument to me that somehow because millions of dollars were flooded in our community to lie to us that then all of a sudden we lost a municipalization vote by 3. Somehow that means we shouldn't be pursuing something that is in the very best interest of our community, which is keeping our local energy dollars here.
And this is not about a vote. This is about data. This is about the request for data that Alliant has denied, that the IUB has supported the ask. And this is the ask for us to have counsel who specializes in utility law to support us in this. We do not have a motion on the table, correct?
Correct.
I would make a motion to support the MEU recommendation on the IUB response.
Second.
No, not a public meeting. No.
Might you consider putting with a cap on it?
That is in the recommendation.
Sure.
That's in
the recommendation.
Okay. Motion made by Hadley, seconded by.
I was first.
Motion made by Steve, seconded.
No. Motion made by Hadley, seconded by Steve.
Okay.
By Stephen.
Yes.
Mayor, can we hear from concerns in the audience?
It's not a hearing.
I'm always all about hearing people speak if that's
sure.
Kent Clokey, 702 Decor Avenue. I've stayed silent through this process up to this point. We had a referendum how many years ago? And that referendum failed by a close measure. And I question some of the votes that were put into that referendum, but I'm not going to go there at this point. But that referendum failed. The commissions and the city council have asked Alliant Energy for information that they have repeatedly come back and said is proprietary. And I compare it to a business coming into town or trying to make improvements on their business, and they have to do or should do their due diligence and do a business feasibility study and studies. And the businesses, I'll use the grocery because I was in it for 12 years, my family was in it. And we did multiple feasibility studies to see, should we expand? Should we rebuild? What should we do? Okay. As we do those feasibility studies, it wasn't even thought of to go to our competitors, be it Fairway, be it a co-op. It'd be like Hy-Vee coming into town and asking Fairway and the co-op for their business information, what their payroll is, what their expenses are, down the line, which is proprietary information in order for us to go in competition with them or try to put them out of business. So what the city and the Sustainability Commission and MEU task force is asking Alliant for is proprietary information to try to put themselves out of business. It just doesn't make sense on a business stance. That granted they're a monopoly, but if that information is out there in other forms, as a business, we had to go dig for it and find the most accurate information we could find to make our feasibility study work. And I don't follow why this issue with Alliant is any different than any other business. As a municipal electric utility, you are a business going into business trying to put them out of business. So why should they give you information to try to put them out of business?
I appreciate, your point of view. And I know that there's going to be a lot more discussion. I also remind the MEU task force of their task of educating the community as the value of it as well, which is a huge part of that. I also agree with the fact that what we're asked to do at this point is for this part, and that it will be coming back again. And I was comfortable with the fact that there is a cap as far as how much is being spent, because that amount of money is in place currently. But I appreciate your comments, and I look forward to, as you move forward, to coming back again and talking at the time when we're going to be working more with that aspect.
Thank you.
Just because I know Paul is writing, I would like to speak on behalf of that in terms of why would we want this data from Alliant and how is it fair? So as a regulated municipal, or as a regulated monopoly, all of their infrastructure is essentially paid for by ratepayers. So to some degree, ratepayers in Decorah have already bought the equipment here in Decorah, which is why one of the numbers that we want, the number I'm most interested in, isn't what they have here, because we can look that up. We can look up Alliance, every piece of equipment they have here, we can look up. It's a public document. What we don't know is how it is a utility board will assess the depreciation of that equipment. But in some ways, that equipment is owned by the public. Like, we pay for all of that equipment through our rates. And every time Alliant puts in a new piece of equipment, our rates go up because we buy it. And I don't think it's unfair for us to figure out, so what is the depreciated value of the equipment that we've already bought? It isn't like, it's not a capitalistic market. Alliant isn't some competitive organization or entity that has the free market able to regulate them in any way, shape, or form. We are beholden to them. And because of that, the utility board, therefore, has essentially the responsibility of making sure that they are being transparent with us. They are not being transparent with us. They haven't been transparent with us. They've been chastised by the utility board numerous times for their lack of transparency. And all we're continuing to do is to make sure that the utility board knows that they're still not being transparent, even though they've been asked to do that. And to figure out what is that formula for depreciation for assets that we have bought as ratepayers. And can we as ratepayers control our own energy future in a way that saves us money as opposed to paying shareholders?
Mayor,
Thank you.
I'd like to speak in support of the motion. I think that that the right decision-making body is now firmly aware of this conversation, and that's the IUB. They're the ones who get to decide what it's fair for the city to ask for and what's not. That's the agreement that Alliant made with the state of Iowa when they were given the franchise to be a monopoly in this town. They said, we'll serve Decorah and we'll follow your rules. The IUB gets to determine the rules by applying Iowa law. And that's why it's important that we have a lawyer, because this is a complicated, arcane, very specialized corner of the law. And we want to come to the table that we were invited to for a discussion with the IUB so that we can figure out what it's our right to ask for and what it's not. Our best chance of getting something favorable for the city is to make sure we're represented competently by good legal counsel. I think given that this is a very discreet request for a relatively small pool of money to pursue a specific claim before the IUB in a process that's kind of unique and new and I think exciting for transparency in the state of Iowa, I think this is a great investment of city dollars. I would not support a motion to just hire a counsel with no cap on it and pursue this process from start to finish. But for this particular specific discussion between the IUB, Alliant, and Decorah, I think it's important that we're represented by council. So I support the motion.
Thank you.
I think most of you know how I feel about spending, you know, all these dollars to essentially go to war with Alliant Energy. And I'm not optimistic that there will ever be a bond referendum small enough that the citizens of Decorah will vote yes to indebt themselves in for whether it's 10 million or 20 million or $30 million. However, I do think that we have to get to a vote at some time in the near future. And if this helps move that along and just have the vote, then let's do it. But when that vote is done, this is over.
Okay, I'm going to call for the vote. Roll call.
Hadley.
Aye.
Zittergruen.
Aye.
Luce.
Aye.
Johnson.
Aye.
Chisel.
No.
Neal.
Aye.
Olson.
Aye.
Okay, motion carried. Okay, consider legislative letters, stormwater, lost and row management.
Right-of-way management.
Right-of-way. Local option sales tax and right-of-way management. That's probably, it's more clear.
Yes, so prepared for council are 3 letters, 6 total, one to our state senator, one to our state representative. They are the first paragraph and second paragraphs of each letter are the same, with the middle paragraph being the one that changes for each specific item. Did this so if council were to approve all 3, it does fit on 1 page. Should the council want to send this letter of all 3, if we get longer than a page, my personal experience is anything more than this one is not going to get read.
I agree.
Again, there's been a couple of, well, and hopefully John will chime in at the department comments, because there's other legislative proposals out there that are also concerning, but these are 3 that we discussed at the last meeting during my report, as stormwater ordinance being a big one. You know, staff and the council spent a lot of time in creating a stormwater ordinance that is unique to Decorah, because Decorah is not the same of the rest of the 900 plus cities throughout the state of Iowa. And so for the legislature to consider a preemptive bill that says cities cannot adopt an ordinance that is out of line with the state of Iowa's requirements, which are, help me here, Jeremy, non-existent. I actually knew that. I just kind of want to pause for dramatic effect. So stormwater ordinance, that was a big one. Right-of-way, on the right-of-way management, there was legislation that would require that cities could not make it mandatory that if you're going to put utilities in our right-of-way, that we require that be in conduit. There is legislation that would prohibit cities from making that a requirement. And on the local option sales tax, this is one that's currently not in discussion at the House level, but is still very much in play at the Senate. Their tax bill for restructuring is looking at increasing the state sales tax from 6 to 7% and making that 7th percent an automatic local, what's now a local option. It's no longer an option. Every city gets 1% of the sales tax. Based on the distribution formula, since we are a county that also collects and distributes sales tax, it's not going to change Decorah's distribution. But as referenced in the letter, in the very same year that the state of Iowa, we are starting to see backfill as part of property tax legislation less than 10 years ago, promised to cities being taken away. That's the concern, is local option sales tax follows that same path. So there's 3 drafts there. Again, first and last paragraphs are the same in each letter. The middle paragraphs, if you insert those all in the same letter, become one page.
Okay.
I'm supportive of all three letters. I would like to see the particular, so in the line about stormwater ordinance where it says preemptive legislation, prevent us from addressing the specific needs of our community and protecting us from long-term flooding. I guess I would like to see the mention of flooding in there. Maybe a little bit of like appealing to the fact that other communities around Decorah have experienced flooding and we're trying to protect ourselves from that would be helpful.
I would agree with that as well, since we're kind of a unique situation here with our flooding. I would like to thank Travis too for running off a copy of the stormwater management plan for me about 2 weeks ago that I can now throw in the trash. But I appreciate the effort anyway to get me up to speed.
Pages
yeah,
it,
to
right?
get me up to speed on that. But thanks.
I'd move the council endorse the letters and authorize them to be sent.
I'll second.
Okay, motion made by Luce, seconded by Neil. Emily, tell me again where you want that.
Oh, I just, and I don't want to make it longer than a page, so I would just add in the word flooding somewhere into that. It's the second to the last line of the middle paragraph. So it would prevent us from addressing the specific needs of our community, including long-term including flood prevention.
With
something
the
like
suggested edits.
Yeah. Suggested edit,
words.
just say the word flooding in there. That would be great.
Yep.
Okay.
So
motion has been made and seconded. Discussion.
Didn't mean to step on it, but I'm sorry about that, Mayor. I just want to make sure that these bills, did they all make it through the funnel week last week?
So lost, since it's part of Ways and Means, that's always going to be, that's funnel proof. Right away maintenance did, our right of way is through, and the other on stormwater, depending, they can tack it on. That's my concern, honestly. So it hadn't advanced in its current state, but my concern is it can be tacked on at any point in time to a Ways and Means or to a, there's like 7 different categories.
What, can I just ask, like, I get some of, I mean, I don't understand, but I know why they are proposing these bills. Why the conduit? I don't understand why getting rid of conduit in the right of way. What's the, I mean, does it save money? Does it, I mean, what, I don't even understand that.
If I were to speculate, conduit costs more money, and the price, as we know with the fiber that we're exploring, the cost of conduit has increased dramatically. And so if I were to make an assumption is service providers want to avoid, they want to do direct bury if they can.
So this is it's a lobby by service providers.
Correct.
Okay, that's all. I was just curious who on their right mind would not want to put their.
That would be if I was speculating.
Okay.
Okay.
There are certain ones like electric. If you hit and it's a direct bury, you know you hit it, and so
because you're dead.
Right. That's why I'm so curious. Why wouldn't you want your stuff in conduit? But I get lobbying.
Okay. Roll call.
Luce.
Aye.
Neil.
Aye.
Sittergruen.
Aye.
Hadley.
Aye.
Johnson.
Aye.
Chisel. Olson.
Aye.
Motion carried.
I think we should just authorize you for any attack at home rule. Just write a letter.
The next
Any
one, I would like
I
to.
don't have that kind of time.
I would like the word beer to be inserted, as I did in my senior paper at Luther, to see if anybody actually
Read it.
Okay, moving right along. Consider resolution 3249 approving preliminary plans and specifications, costs, and schedule for Decorah 2022 alley improvement projects.
Hadley would make a motion to consider resolution 3249 as.
I'll second.
Motion made by Hadley, seconded by Neil. Any discussion? Hearing none. Roll call.
Hadley.
Aye.
Neil.
Aye.
Johnson.
Aye.
Chisel. Olson.
Aye.
Luce.
Aye.
Zittergruen.
Aye.
Motion carried. Consider ordinance 1288 amending chapter 1344 stormwater management ordinance.
Well, while we still can, we're going to make some tweaks to our current. So I'm going to have Jeremy answer some follow-ups to this, but there's some verbiage that we wanted to clean up, if you will. The initial ordinance referred to the lot being developed. And so if a lot exceeded a half an acre, it had to abide by our stormwater ordinance. Well, Scooter's Coffee is on a lot currently larger than an acre, but as they subdivide the parcel down, it gets them less than a half acre, but it gets close. But again, their area they're disturbed is fairly small. So what we looked at changing was getting away from lot, first off, and getting to area of disturbance. And once we did that, so the area of disturbance, the state of Iowa, don't confuse this with a stormwater ordinance, but the state of Iowa does require that if you were doing construction of an acre or more, that you must submit a stormwater protection plan, stormwater pollution prevention plan. Mm-hmm. Yes. And this ordinance would require that we receive a copy of that, and you would have to comply with the ordinance if you've disturbed more than 1 acre as it's proposed, as opposed to a half an acre lot.
So you're cleaning up that language from a half an acre for a half a lot to 1 acre.
Well, we're removing lot from the discussion at all. The current language is a half acre lot. So we're removing lot, but we are also proposing increasing on the commercial side to 1 acre, and on residential development, it's currently 2 acre, going down to 1. Again, consistency. They are required to submit a stormwater pollution prevention plan to the state of Iowa, and then we also get a copy of that. Jeremy, other slight tweaks there?
I think you summarized it well. We did add an option for waivers. We have some unique situations here in town. We've had enough of these come through now where we've discovered several unique situations, which is kind of the reasoning for some of these proposed changes. So the only other one would be that we do want a copy of record drawings once the project is complete, so we know what was actually installed. So that is an additional requirement that will need to be submitted after construction.
Don't all speak at once.
I move adoption of ordinance 1288 as amended.
Second.
Moved by Zittergruen, seconded by Olson. Any further discussion? Hearing none, roll call.
Zittergruen?
Aye.
Olson?
Aye.
Johnson?
Aye.
Chisel? Aye. Neal?
Aye.
Luce?
Aye.
Hadley?
Aye.
Motion carries. Discussion on mayor and city council compensation. Can you give background on that, please?
Yes, so the mayor and council, if you wish to choose or change compensation, this council would have to change the ordinance, and then it would not become effective until the next general election. So again, this is, I know some of the concepts, well, the mayor and council is voting themselves a raise. Keep in mind, this is not going to effect until the next election cycle.
City elections.
Correct. City general elections.
2023. Yep. I think we should draft an ordinance. I think we should council should be paid for work sessions.
So what is the definition that how much of a definition do you have to give?
Well, for the staff to draft an ordinance would have to reflect the changes as proposed by council.
Okay.
So that's what we're trying to get at right here. We're getting into those discussion items that we talked about adding at the end of meetings that would allow for staff to then leave and come back with proposed ordinance.
Gotcha.
I would recommend that we draft a new ordinance that council gets paid for committee meetings and work sessions, but if others don't, it's certainly work sessions or any meeting where the majority of council is present. I'm open.
I guess I would be in favor of any meeting where all the council are required, not necessarily committee meetings, but for the meetings that are work sessions or a regular meeting like this, that yes, we should be compensated the way we are for regular meetings.
Or would that include personnel? I would assume because we're all on.
That's all.
Yes.
Okay. I'm game with that.
Go ahead, Lucy.
I think committees are an important thing, and I think we should be compensated for doing the work and attending those as well. So because there's a quorum at a committee, if every committee member is there. So in effect, it is another open meeting that we're meeting the city obligations for. So I would say that that should be included in the compensation package.
And
So you're saying that the meeting before this meeting, you would get paid for that and this meeting on the very same night?
I don't think that would be true.
What if we did, because I see that, and I also see that, like, I like to come to every committee meeting, but I wouldn't want people to think that I just come to committee meetings to get paid. So I am wondering if we did like a one committee meeting a month, or, I mean, I'm fine not getting paid for committee meetings, but I also understand sometimes there have been months where you wind up at 4 committee meetings a month. So I hear that. I'm just trying to figure out how can we make it so that it is, as Kirk said, you're not getting paid to be here for the 2 meetings tonight, and you're not getting paid every time you come to a committee meeting, so that.
I think it gets confusing if you add committee meetings to it, because there are so many other meetings that some of us attend that aren't necessarily council meetings, but are required of us as a council member, whether it's an economic development meeting or a chamber meeting or job, whatever. I just think I think you should limit it to what we do here in these chambers. And I would not be in favor of including, 20-minute long committee meetings or 45-minute long committee meetings. I think that's excessive.
I mean, I think I'm agreeing, but I also want to get rid of committee structure anyway, so.
And just so the public can understand, how much do we get paid per meeting?
$50.
I would say it's $50 for you guys, right?
Okay.
Yeah, I guess that ties into sort of why I think this is an important conversation for us to be having. If you have to be wealthy or retired or really, really self-giving to serve on council, then that does exclude a lot of great people in Decorah from leadership potential. And right now, the way that, it's an archaic old fee structure, and I think it's time to update it. I know personally, I do track all my council expenses, including childcare, and they are much, much more than I get paid to serve on city council. So I think it's important that we bring those things into better alignment. So in addition to pay for the committee meeting a month, I'd like us to look at how long has $50 a meeting been extant? How long has that been the case?
Did you say 1999?
Well, that's what the.
Because I think it used to be 30, didn't it?
It was 40 when I first got on the council, and then we changed that. 2007.
Well, then it was a lot more than 30.
Yes.
So yeah, I guess I'd like to see, I'd like to see that number bumped, and maybe we can take a lesson from our negotiation with the rural fire department, rural fire people, that maybe we can tie this number to our city's pay of its non-exempt employees or something, so that it's an automatic thing that happens every year. We can round it to the nearest dollar. That'd be my preference.
I'm not sure you can do that.
I don't think you can do that. Right?
I don't think you can do that.
I think you can if the ordinance were to either fix a percent, like let's say it's an arbitrary number, pick 3% or something like that. And I think you can also do it adjusting by a CPI for urban consumer, and as long as you're specifying what it's adjusting by, because I know you can do it for utility rates and set a standing increase there.
I'd have to think about when that would take effect. If it would, and I suppose if you put it in the ordinance, you've already voted on it, and that new ordinance wouldn't take effect till the next
2024.
Yeah, 2024, and then it's set.
So you could actually put that type of definition in.
And that would spare future councils from doing something that's so awkward. And I think that's important. It's also, like I said, I think this is about justice and representation. It's not about getting a raise or getting paid more for me. I want to make sure that people who can't serve on council because they can't afford it can also sit at this table.
So it sounds like there would be 2 things that would be in it. One is the payment for when all the council would be at a meeting, and the second would be raising or defining the raise as far as in the future what that would entail.
Is there, again, a general consensus helps for the drafting of the ordinance so that we don't have to come back after a draft is done and make changes.
$100 per meeting.
What's that?
$100 per meeting being the base, and then your percentage.
I don't think that's as out of line as maybe some people might think at first glance. I know that I put in, 6-7 hours of work for every meeting that the council meets, and I don't think I'm alone in that. That would take me above minimum wage. That would be cool.
Yeah, it's one of those things when you start talking on an annual basis as opposed to on a per meeting basis. We're proposal of $100, just using base figures, would go from $1,200 a year for a council member to $2,400 a year.
It actually would be more because you're talking about also paying people for those at one additional meeting a month at least, plus special meetings.
Right. If that were to be the case, yes. I was again just using base figures of 2 council meetings a month.
So I do recognize that, like, I was on council, sort of this volunteerism, right? So I'm not sure 100. I'm not sure that I sit well with 100. That seems like a big jump from where we are right now.
Is that
quite honestly, there's a part of me that's like, I'm okay with 50 just getting paid for the meetings I attend, knowing that I do spend far more hours. I mean, if you work out our per hour rate, it's something like 30 cents an hour. I mean, let's be honest. It is more of, while I'm here, there are many things happening at home that I could use support on when I would, childcare, or whether it's feeding my family, or just this notion of, it is hard for other people to do this work because they do have childcare and they do have other expenses, or they are a single parent, or many things. So I don't know that I support $100, but I definitely support some kind of raise and getting paid for the meetings that we're here.
Would you like to see a comparison of what other?
Oh, that would be a great idea.
Council, what other council fees or price salaries they're getting?
Yes.
We'll be having personnel committee meetings soon talking about our other salaried employees. I did instruct Travis and Carrie to put together some information for us. We could certainly add this onto that discussion if it's appropriate.
That'd be good.
That'd be great.
Because we need to have a motion made by the end of June, correct?
Yes.
Wouldn't
No,
you have
not
to?
by the end of June. No, you'd need it by
before the
we
next
just had an election cycle, right? Yeah.
Before
So
the-
we've got time.
before the next
We have
election.
time, except that we've talked
You
about
get
this
told that
for
a
a
lot,
year.
don't you? We've got time.
Yeah, this came up in 2021 and
Yeah.
2020.
How many times does it have to be voted on? Just once?
Three times.
times. Oh, yeah,
It's an
because
ordinance,
it's an
so
ordinance.
3
That's
readings.
3 readings, but not until November of 23. Do you
I've
to get
got
this
you.
done?
Let's add it to our personnel meeting. And
Okay.
Quick
That sounds
question
good.
though, does council want, I'm all about one and done and let's address this all, but does council want, it sounded like there's pretty good consensus on the work sessions. Anytime there's all of council is required to attend. Does council want us to draft an ordinance that gets that accomplished right away? Or are you good with waiting? Good with waiting?
I think 1 news cycle and not 3 is probably good for everyone.
Yep.
We don't want them to read in the paper that we've given ourselves a raise every single month between now and the end of time. So.
And to be
Perfect.
clear, we're not giving ourselves a raise at all.
I just
Many of us are off in
want to make sure
2023.
that nobody was asking why that ordinance was ready to go next time.
Yep.
Perfect.
Okay. Discussion on public restroom accessed through Bank of the West building. Can we have some background on that, please?
Sure. I'm going to rely a lot on John on this one. Thank you to Councilmember Hadley that was able to provide much easier access to a lease entered into many, many years ago so that staff didn't have to search the archives and find one. But the public restroom accessed off of Bank of the West building, it's actually under the adjacent building and part of that building. There are issues arising in the bathroom, and I'm talking about the service line, the sewer service line, that are causing some backups and issues in the restroom. Some of you may have noticed that facility has been closed for about a week, maybe 2, maybe close to 2. But the current owner, which I believe is three owners from the lease,
Well, it's an LLC, Beach Glass.
Yeah, so they have expressed concern on the current agreement. There's no payment from the city for the public restrooms. The consideration at the time when it was with Bank of the West for the access, and the building was currently owned at the time, was to provide access for the drive-through was part of that compensation on the lease. Since that LLC or the current LLC doesn't have that as compensation anymore for the public restroom, they're wanting either additional compensation for the restroom to keep existing, and they want the city to maintain the service line as part of that contract. $800 a month, correct? $800 a month is what they're requesting, and we need to maintain the service line if and when issues arise.
And what does that cost?
$9,600 a year.
And what are our other options?
So we are currently paying nothing? Is that how it works right now? Okay.
What's our other options?
We have,
Just close it.
Close it.
yeah.
And not have a public restroom downtown?
Well,
No, we have, how many did we say? We have one at the police department, one here, public library. I don't know what else in the downtown.
Right. The
area
options are
that's-
pretty limited. It's here, public library. You ask for options. Those are really the only two we're able to come up with at this point.
Well, and working with Mark too, those things get trashed pretty darn bad. So I would say we just walk away.
We're estimating.
Currently it's locked.
Yeah, we're estimating in supplies, which is less of an estimation, but in Mark's time as well in cleaning up, it does get trashed frequently, about 4,000 to 5,000 in supplies and staff time and maintenance of it.
My question is less about the actual restroom itself and more about the access through the arcade and how it potentially breaks the agreement for the land on which the drive-through is owned through
That's what I need John to
on
fill in
Bank
for.
of the West, because it's a three-party lease. And as I read the lease was that the original lease that was signed many, many years ago that dictated all this was that the restroom would be built in what is the Bank of the West building. If you read the address of where the restroom would be located, it is not at 128 Westwater, the Ralph building, which is where the restroom is located. We have signed an extension of that lease, and Bank of the West, Community First, or B&B Paribas, or now whoever owns them now, is benefiting. If this lease is broken, I would like City Attorney Anderson to explain to us how the other moving balls in the air are affected.
Well, then it'd be just like any other lease where somebody stops paying rent. I mean, if we don't.
Well, my question is, currently Bank of the West is getting the drive-through location at no cost to them, correct? Or $1.
Well, so something I guess I did not understand. I understood the restroom was under the Ralph building. Isn't the arcade though actually in the Bank of the West building?
Correct.
Okay.
But the lease itself requires for this 3-horse trade that the restroom be provided, access be provided, and then in kind, the city provides the area for the Bank of the West drive-through. Could we offset the cost of the restroom by charging Bank of the West or whoever the presiding organization is the equal amount for that drive-through land for us to be made whole? Because they're benefiting.
Yeah, it's an interesting question at whether or not Bank of the West, when they sold the Ralph building, and I don't know, it was a Community First at the time, whether they should have reserved that restroom for the city in their sale. And because of the failure to do that, does that breach the lease? Now, if you read the lease really closely, it says we have an easement through the arcade.
Yes.
And then Bank of the Community First at the time was to build a restroom to the city standard.
In the bank in the building.
Yeah, it
says
said
in the bank.
Well,
it specifies the address.
Yeah, it specifies the address, but it also says according to the plans and specifications approved by the city. So what I'm getting at is I wasn't here obviously at the time, but it seems like we must have approved where it was put.
Well, we must have approved it, but contract language is contract language.
Well,
and they are benefiting from this with land that's city owned.
Yeah,
my recommendation would be that we look at this lease closely. I have intimate knowledge of the restroom, both as a former owner and as a business owner who sends people to that restroom, because you can't have people go down your stairs and use the restroom and have them fall and sue you, which happens. So I feel it's very important, even though it's a mess and a hassle for the city. I don't necessarily feel that if Beach Glass LLC is going to take on the restroom and maintenance, that $800 a year or a month is out of line. But I would like that $800 a month to be made whole by what the city is giving up in the right of way or the land that we are now providing to Bank of the West for their drive-through. So that would be my solution.
Yeah, we could negotiate with Bank of the West. Give us time because we've got to find somebody at Bank of the West who can respond to us. But that could be a conversation we have with them. If the council, again, that goes back to whether the council wants to keep that public restroom. It sounds like there's got to be.
But regardless of whether we keep the public restroom, then if we don't keep the public restroom, then Bank of the West is essentially sitting on city property without
they have no
legal right to do so. Right. I mean, that is part of the contract. So either I agree with Ross. We need to figure out what's going on with Bank of the West and that piece of property.
Because if not,
it's tied up in a lease that we're going to walk away from, then they should be either a new lease with them for that property or
that drive-through becomes our new public restroom.
And park. And new park office.
Well, it sounds like there's a little bit of work to do.
Yeah, I knew you were waiting.
But actually, until we come to any type of agreement, that restroom is locked for now. Until we can, is that correct?
That is correct.
That's correct. So I guess maybe we have to find out more information and come back on how to work with that.
Yep. We'll start making attempts with Bank of the West because, as pointed out, regardless of council's outcome on the public restroom debate, the drive-through, that's got to be a lease. We got to have something clear.
If we put barricades at the drive-through, I am sure that someone from Bank of the West will reach out accordingly, as we have done with the restroom.
Yeah, that's true.
Okay. Anything else? Okay. Discussion on hotel motel revenue.
Okay, so after the last committee meeting, I was directed to draft a couple of scenarios based on discussions at the committee meeting, and I did a projection. If everyone recalls, does everyone have their copy? I've got extras here if you want to send those down.
This one? Okay.
Okay, so on this, you see the last 4 full fiscal years and where we're at for fiscal 22 for the first half. You can see by using the previous 4 full fiscal years, there's the average calculated as the first line for the 3 total revenue, Decor jobs, hotel marketing, and parks and rec. One of the options discussed at that committee meeting was a 30-30-30-10, with 10 being a contingency of the council for discretionary purposes. So holding 500,000 as a constant, had to pick a constant so that we could show what these adjustments might do, using 500,000, which I don't believe is too far off of an estimate for revenues moving forward. A 30-30-30-10 is 150,000 to those three entities, with 50,000 remaining for council discretion. Another one asked was a 25 to Decorah jobs, 25 to hotel marketing, and 50 to Parks and Rec. So that amounts to 125,000 for Decorah jobs, 125,000 hotel marketing, and 250,000 Parks and Rec. There was a 2020-60 also requested. You can see that's 100,000, 100,000, and 300,000. There was in this sheet that everyone received, I did also not proposed by any council members, but something for consideration. And I'm not proposing these figures necessarily, but if 500,000, and we assume that's going to be the revenue stream, if the council were to set static figures for all three, because I think 500,000, that's realistic. That's actually arguably conservative based on the trends that we're seeing for this current fiscal year. If we hold each one of those static at 150,000 for Decorah jobs, 125,000 for hotel marketing, 225,000 for Parks and Rec, and then anything above 500,000 in revenue becomes the contingency. Again, those numbers can go up, down, however you want to discuss, but that was just some other figures that I wanted to propose for council, knowing that a contingency was part of that discussion.
Where did you come up with those figures, Travis, just out of curiosity, the 150, 125, and 225? Did you just kind of make those up, or was that?
Yeah, I made them up.
Okay.
If we went, what about a 30-30-40 on the first 500,000, and anything above that goes to the city contingency fund development? Would that be acceptable?
Say that again.
30-30-40 going across here, Decorah jobs, hotel, motel, and Park and Rec. 30, 30, and then 40 to Park and Rec on the first $500,000 that comes in, and any monies above that goes to the city contingency fund for development programs or emergency use.
I guess I'm more in favor of Travis's last proposal, which mirrors something that, you know, I think was sort of proposed in that discussion, Travis. So I don't think this is you proposing something out of whole cloth. You know that
it's just completely possible it was back here.
No,
somebody else's good idea.
And I'm saying that, you know, just if that makes you feel better, I do think that this has been thought of also. You know, I personally think it's a good idea because it incentivizes the council to act in ways that that are, you know, that grow our hotel motel revenue. That's kind of good for all parties. I also don't see a strong reason to tether the two non-city organizations money to be equal to one another. I think Decorah Jobs has made a good case for their historical need for, you know, the amount that they've requested, and I think Winneshiek Economic Development, or the tourism hotel group, has done the same. Historically, we've given Decorah Jobs a little bit more, and I think that there's some wisdom there. So I personally think that the way the breakdown works in the last formula is a really good one, and it keeps funding our parks at a pretty robust level. I like the idea.
I really appreciated several meetings ago, you went into more depth about the 2080 and the power and confidence that the city can have when using a 2080 for their funding. I'm much more confident providing money when we have the opportunity to also write our our goals within the gift of public funds. So in conjunction with Stephen and you, I also would support the cap and contingency plan because it allows us control, and I think it's fiscally responsible based on the increased revenue of online sales.
So are you suggesting that within the framework of increasing the amounts to job and to jobs and to marketing, that we would include in the 2080 agreement
Goals, metrics.
Goals and metrics by which we would like that money spent?
Yes.
I could get on board with that. And I think that it doesn't have to be all of the money, but I definitely think that the council should have input into some of the money that is essentially public money, that there is some amount of council priorities set within that money. I could get on board with it if that was the agreement.
So I might provide a comment to, obviously there's a decent amount of people in attendance, and to probably put some people at ease, the cap contingency formula that is being discussed currently is actually a proposed increase for all parties involved.
Okay. What happens if we get into one of these years where we don't hit the 500,000? Do you have those percentages? I don't have my calculator out here.
Right. And so we could structure it, Randy, how you were proposing 30, 30, 40. Part of the reason I picked numbers that are also reflected above is so that I can know what the percentages are easily enough. 150,000 equates to 30%.
Right.
125,000 equates to 25%. And 225 was honestly the remainder of those other two numbers, 45%. So as you were recommending before, or talked about before, Randy, if those percentages are set on the first 500,000 and then the remainder over 500,000 becomes contingency, it'd be structured that way. It's structured on percentages.
Yeah. Okay.
I would actually, if we didn't hit that 500,000 mark, I would actually prefer that the city kept their percentage the same, but that we would change the percentage that we were giving away. So that we never lost in the city budget, given that we have less flexibility within our budget, and they're city dollars. So I guess in my mind, I want to keep the flexibility towards the city end if we don't hit the 500,000, and not a straight percentage across the board, much like we did prior, where we had sort of up to, or this amount, but not to exceed. That would be my preference. But
I don't think it's very likely that we're ever going to see another year where we don't have at least 500,000 in income. And I mean, just looking at the trends, I should knock on some wood, but but during a pandemic where everything shut down, we exceeded those numbers almost right away afterward. And I don't want to unnecessarily complicate what seems to me to be a pretty elegant solution that checks off a lot of people's boxes. Up to $500,000 being divided 3 ways in proportion with the way it's historically been done, additional money becoming part of it. I mean, that could be a lot of money. And I'm excited about what possibilities this would raise for the council.
Yeah, I mean, how conservative an estimate is 500,000 in terms of what would you expect a remainder contingency to be?
The last 2 quarters of the current fiscal year total $350,000 for the first 2 quarters. Now, granted, those first 2 quarters for every preceding year exceed 3rd and 4th quarter. I don't want council to say, oh, we're going to get $700,000, because that's not on a direct quarter to quarter to quarter payment.
Historically, it does look like the 3rd and the 4th quarters are the highest performing, or am I looking at?
No.
So,
I'm sorry. I annualized it. I put it on a calendar year, and you're talking fiscal year. Yeah. Yep. Okay. Gotcha.
Sorry.
Thank you.
And that's where, again, I made this spread. This became my spreadsheet and it's different from the original spreadsheet that was used at the last meeting, because I believe this one is one, more condensed, and two, provided, in my opinion, it provided me a better streamlined depiction of the last 4.5 years.
Well, I could get on board with the 30, 25, 45, and then the remainder going to the city on the first 500,000.
Yeah, no, I like that too. At 30, 25, those are,
you know, and then the
good
only
numbers.
thing we'd have to negotiate going forward would be possibly the 500,000 if things keep growing, because the expenses for jobs and marketing and park and rec would be going up. So then we'd have to look at that. That'd be the only number we would negotiate then. Oh,
is just the cap.
Yeah, if you know we start getting up to $700,000, $800,000,
well, there's no
600 we would go to for the percentages, and then the excess comes back to the city.
But there's no reason that with that excess, we couldn't, I mean, I hope with that excess, we're also going to be doing economic development money with it, right? I mean, so I guess in my mind, if there are projects that jobs would need more money for, that they would just come to the city and look at the contingency there. Or if there's a downtown business who has a really innovative idea. I mean, I think the idea is the flexibility of that money that council would have for economic development. Not that that means that that money couldn't be available to jobs or to
could be available to any one of the three.
It could be, right. It could be available. I think about the child care center, right? I mean, so if something, obviously that's done, but if there's another project of that level of which there needs to be greater funding, we would have that cash then, or so to speak. But.
Let's hope we have that problem down the road. We have excess money that we have to debate. I'm hearing a fair amount. I'm sorry, Kristen. I've heard a lot of us say that we support this last formula as at least the way that we can all get on board with. So are you waiting for a motion? And as part of that motion, should we talk about, are there anything that we want to work into the agreements in terms of expectations from the council?
Yes. Actually, for this, it's discussion only.
Oh, okay. Yep. Thank you, Mayor. So would you like us to discuss the hopes that we have for how the money's used? Is that
correct?
Helpful?
It can be one of two ways. Now, obviously be clear to staff, because we're going to be preparing the 28Es. If it's a desire or a requirement, please differentiate between the two, that if you want the 28E to require something to be done, or if you're expressing that we would like to see this done with the funding, please differentiate between the two.
And is this an ordinance? Okay.
No, this has to,
Okay.
does there have to be, there's no public hearing required with this one either, right? Yeah, just resolution.
And it'd be a 28, is it in the form of a 28?
So historically, the agreement with jobs, and this has been renewed like 7 times, but has had pretty similar language throughout, that the money is for economic development of Decorah and the greater Decorah area to attract industry, maintain economic development, respond for requests for economic development, encourage new businesses in the greater Decorah area, no use except attractions and promotion of economic and industrial development, and the requirement that there be council participation on the Decorah Jobs Board, which is currently at a pretty high level. Are there other things that we would want to have baked into this agreement with Decorah Jobs? My personal preference, but this is subject to the whims of the council too, is I'd like to see, and I've talked to Stephanie about this already, I'd like to see a shift in focus towards infill, towards thickening, development that thickens and revitalizes the core of our town, and development that sometimes is willing to work at a slightly smaller scale. We all celebrate it when we can cut a ribbon outside of a new business that employs 100 people. It does just as much for the city if 100 businesses add an employee each. I don't like the pattern of our downtown businesses sort of closing and increasingly vacant storefronts, especially when so many of them move into business parks that we built at great expense. So, and I'm not sitting here trying to judge or condemn the past. I'm saying that I would like to see a shift in perspective to embrace development that's focused on the center first.
I agree with that. I think when I think about it, I also think about downtown businesses who are doing remodeling or trying to upgrade buildings. Certainly focuses on our sustainability plan, but I don't know how you write that, right? I mean, it's sort of like, I'm not even going to say it. But
Well, if you got one company that's saying they're going to bring money in, and then you say where you want it to come into, I mean, that isn't it kind of limiting by stating?
No, I think that what I'm saying is that the dollars we're investing in businesses, I want to be equally, or not equally, but I want us to focus on investments in our current businesses in ways that help them expand, and in ways that helps our downtown continue to thrive. I am also concerned about the number of businesses that are closing downtown. But I don't know how you write that.
I think the other thing that we need to be cognizant of is our strategic plan. We all wanted economic development goals, and we all discussed housing. Housing and childcare were the two things that were highest priority for several years. Jobs has done a brilliant job of securing childcare and is working toward what will be a first-in-class solution. Although I certainly support infill and the support of downtown, I would like to see facade improvements based on the Iowa Economic Development assessment of downtown, that one of the ways for us to increase our tax base and to make our businesses more attractive downtown is facade and streetscape, which isn't a huge lift, but it's very, it's quantifiable, it's tangible, and we can say, okay, jobs, reach out, start a grant program, reach out to these people and do this. Or housing, we want to see an increase of X number of houses within the tax base of the city of Decorah. Whether that is new construction, whether that is Iowa prison systems housing, whether it is bringing in a new developer or working with existing landowners, or within Jobs land, because Jobs also controls a fair amount of land within the park, and not all of it can be used for housing. Some of it is tagged for commercial development because of grant restrictions. But I think reflecting our larger goals and short, small, but quantifiable goals within an X number of year period, we can realize a lot of potential impact to our community and to our core tax base, and addressing one of our larger strategic challenges all at the same time.
Okay, so I heard a lot of things there, but I wasn't sure what specific. Like
Well,
what specific, like what would, if we were write a 2080 agreement, what would be the specific ask? Like designate a certain amount of money for facade and street improvement downtown?
Yep.
Okay.
Well, I think that, you know, I'm thinking about this remainder amount, the contingency amount. You know, wouldn't it make sense to, I mean, if we're going to go with 150, 125, and then 225 for park and rec, might it make more sense to do a little less park and rec and put a little more in contingency to allow for these kinds of things you're talking about to happen? Instead of having, you know, just 150 that goes to jobs, maybe they might have a project like funding for facades that is over and above what we're giving them to do other regular economic development opportunities.
That would be an opportunity for us to do a match then possibly, because there are state programs. I know the city of Decorah used them in their downtown. They had some kind of street facade program because the Decorah law office moved into an old building and were able to bring it back to what it looked like back in the early 1900s. And that was kind of a two-part match with that. And then there was state and federal funding on it. So, I mean, I would agree, Kirk, that would be a good way to use this, because $150,000 doesn't go far if we get two or three development projects coming in, bang, bang.
Right.
And I think if we have the contingency within the city, we can negotiate that with jobs when that comes up.
Exactly.
I don't feel the need
Exactly.
to go.
But at least the money is there in our budget every year.
Can
Well,
I have a question
hopefully.
about when we don't have a 2080 agreement with Park and Rec, right? I mean, that money is essentially city money. We're just designating it to Park and Rec. I guess I think quite honestly, when I utilize the park system all the time. I think that as much as people come to town for Toppling and Goliath, there's lots of people who are coming for our parks. And I see that that demand is only going to grow, and the need to caretake those parks is also going to grow. I think their budget needs to grow. We understand Carlson Park needs a lot of work. We can see the benefits the parks are providing, but I also see that restrooms are going to need to be built at some point. When you walk the trails, you can see that too. So I guess I'm not one for saying,
access.
yeah, I'm not one for saying that we should be limiting park budget at this point. I think we should be increasing it. I guess I'm comfortable knowing that chances are we're going to have a remainder of significant amount that we'll be able to do what you're suggesting, which I love. I just don't see cutting park and
I guess the only other thing I, would throw out there, I think in some ways the percentage thing might be a better way to go, just because then we don't have to negotiate it year in and year out. If there's, I don't know, just a thought.
And in the hotel and motel funds, if we want to write a 2080, if we go back to the Iowa Economic Development Assessment of our downtown and the Iowa Department of Transportation Visioning Program, both of those programs recommended wayfinding, which also draws traffic into our community and is cyclical and growing hotel motel funds. The city has put $15,000 into the budget in the street department budget to kickstart the process. I think spending hotel motel marketing, spending money locally, getting people off of the highways to our community and our attractions would be a potential metric as well. Because I don't know that we have a lot of outside marketing efforts now that would be more impactful than wayfinding.
So what I'm hearing,
that might be a 2080 item.
Okay, for the hotel motel. Yeah. I mean, not for hotel, for the hotel marketing, that we'd like to see some investment in wayfinding. I guess I like the flat numbers, and I think it doesn't matter if it's percentage or numbers in terms of like keeping the contract, right? But if we have the flat numbers, Jobs knows they're getting 150, hotel marketing knows they're getting 125, parks know they're getting 225, council knows they're getting whatever is left over, and then whatever that leftover money is just has more conversation around it. And I'm really comfortable with that.
Okay. It seems like there's a fair amount of consensus. And if I may make a suggestion, it's not like Jobs is some star chamber group that's inaccessible or whatever. They're our neighbors and they're people in our community, and they're easy to get a hold of on the phone. I based on conversations I've had with several members of Jobs over the past month in preparing for this, I don't know that it's really necessary for us to restrict their work too much. I suspect that if we indicated to them our hopes and priorities, they would take that very seriously in their considerations. And I'm seeing a lot of nodding. I love it when the crowd agrees, get an amen out there.
I agree with that too, because once you started talking about, well, we should have to do this, and this. And, they actually are the ones that know some of that stuff. And yeah, I think that there's generally some guidance you can give, but I don't want to be restricting them as well. And we actually have council members on all of those committees. So.
I agree, but I do think that there is some sediment in the community, especially in past projects, where the downtown businesses that are looking to remodel and looking to reinvest in their own businesses have not actually gotten what they, I think, deserve from our economic development funding. Now, maybe with our contingency that will change and they can come to us. But I guess when I look at Jobs, I hope that changes for sure, because I think there is some bad blood, so to speak, in terms of what happened. It's as important to me that we attract new businesses as we take care of the ones we have. And I think we haven't done a very good job of that.
Well, and I think economically, when you're looking at the effects of the pandemic, that we have to be looking at what type of incentives or how can we help build those businesses downtown.
Right, but this is, yeah.
It's a little different than, when you're looking back. So.
But yet, how else do we address housing? We say housing and childcare are priorities, but we as a council have no tool or mechanism to affect change. And if we can just put housing in. If we don't want to have it be a metric and quantify it, I'm okay with it. But I think having at least a strategic vision for what we want the focus to be, I don't feel is unusual. When we work with transit, we know that transit is happening. We don't specify the kinds of trucks and cars that they drive. It's transit. When it's low-income housing, we don't specify where they live. It's housing. But if we provide this focus and we say, we would like you to focus on housing and we would like you to focus on the core downtown through this, it is not micromanagement. It is guidance.
Well, and I think from housing standpoint, we have a lot to look at to see where we can get something.
Exactly.
So I can understand where you would say a piece of that.
Yeah.
So maybe that is, Travis, you said guidance requirement, right? What if we, within the 2080 agreement, asked that priorities for jobs, and maybe we even say priorities for jobs with the additional money that we're providing for housing, and that for hotel marketing priority for wayfinding, right? I mean, maybe that is, and maybe that's even where grants are, people start to look for grants, more grants in that regard. I don't know, but it seems like guidance, not requirement.
Yeah,
But
I think having this conversation in public with people in the room is probably good enough for guidance and recommendations.
I'd like to also point out that we can have a 2080 agreement with them and give them guidance whenever we want to. Either unofficially or officially, we could issue a letter as a council saying, this year, could you please focus on this? And, they know that the next time the contract enrollment comes up, we'll be paying attention as to whether or not they take our guidance seriously. Does that make sense? That there are mechanisms for communicating with both of these organizations?
And I think we do need to take the time to thank Jobs and Hotel Motel and everyone that communication is improved. Communication is improved. Strategic goals are being met. We funded the same projects strongly based on a common vision and a common interest. And, I had a call tonight from a member of Jobs who couldn't be here tonight, who said how with the introduction of Travis coming and the mayor and other members, how at least the messaging is getting back and forth. We had a failure to communicate. That failure to communicate is now resolved. And now we can move forward with a shared vision and together. And I think that's great. And I think it supports what Steve and Kirk were saying, but I don't think we have to belabor it.
Legislatively, please watch the legislative environment, because there have been conversations about, because they actually are the ones that state what hotel motel funding is used for. And I've heard some conversations of where they'd like to see some of that change. So please watch that closely. You probably watch that somewhat. I haven't heard anything that's actually come out.
Yeah, I haven't heard much scuttle about hotel motel, but there was a time there where everything was on the table.
Okay, so for
But hotel motel was voted on by the citizens of Decor, and on that ballot measure, it says what we're going to spend it on, correct? Yeah. And the state legislature, I would hope, just can't come in and.
That's what they're proposing for law.
Yeah, I guess I'm wrong, right? Yeah.
Okay, so for clarification, what I'm hearing is that we are going to use the cap contingency plan at a rate with the 150 to jobs, 125 to hotel marketing, 225 to parks, the remainder to council, and that we have now given guidance, and that our 2080 agreement will move forward in good faith and similar to how it's been.
And we will continue to give them guidance. I will continue to pester them at our meetings. I promise. I think that matches a consensus. We've historically done these for 5 years, Travis, and I think there's no reason to deviate from that pattern. That gives them all knowledge that what's coming down the road. And obviously, if we need to renegotiate, we can. But
I would.
The only tweak I would make would be to put the percentage in there as they sit today. And the only thing negotiable would be the cap.
Yeah, I think that'd be up to, and keep the cap at 500 to start with.
Keep it at 500,
and then we can,
as expenses go up and we know that, then we can look at maybe raising that to 600. but keeping these same 30, 25, 45 percentages.
And can we put it?
I agree. I think that if there is an increase in revenue, then the reward should be spread.
But then we don't, I guess I would say then the remainder, I mean, that what you're doing is you're just taking from the remainder, right? I mean, the way that it's written is that we have these numbers with the idea that whatever is above would be council contingency. So if we decide to change the percentage, I mean, if we then take a larger amount in there and there isn't contingency, I mean, you're just eating away at the contingency.
Well,
so I would prefer that we did not use percentages.
It seems like a good time to argue against that would be when it was suggested to raise the cap. And, you know, doing it this way at least makes it kind of clear and straightforward to make that decision if and when the time comes. Nothing, you know, nothing's preventing, you guys would take a bigger check if we decided to do it. So.
And that's, I believe, Stephen, what I was going to point out as well, that contingency can go ahead and be dispersed should council choose. That's the whole concept behind the contingency is council can, short of a 20, I mean, we don't have to amend the 2080 to increase everyone's distribution. The council could use that contingency to increase.
I would just ask that we consider 4 years versus 5 so that we are not belaboring future councils outside of the extent of any of our guaranteed runs.
I think 5 years is fine.
First time it's ever been that long.
That's small?
We did that so Decor Jobs had a
Known
set
amount
amount because of the projects that they took on. But, you know, it used to be 3 years before that.
It was 5 years, 5 years, 5 years, 5 years, then 3 years, then 7 years.
What's
That's
this
why
I would be curious for helpful for jobs, right? They're trying to negotiate, they're trying to think far into the future. So I guess in terms of how long this goes, I would be curious what works well for them.
So if I remember correctly, the 2080s, the way they were structured as well, were not in line with each other. Correct. So the reason for the year changes in duration was to bring the two, all three, but the two 2080s in line with the same time for renewal.
I guess I'm for the 5 year. I think I echo what Councilperson Zittigren said. I think communication, even in the 2 years that I've been here, has been so good. And a lot of like the lenses that I look at are pre-pandemic, are things that I've heard of that happened, concerns. But I think all of that is changing, which is great. And I hope that we just continue on this trajectory of good communication. So with that, I think for jobs, it's better longer. We have this money, 150, 125, 225. We will have hopefully a pot of money that we can then work together on or look at other needs within our community. And the council, whoever is sitting in these seats, can decide what to do with that pot of money. If they want to give it to jobs, if they want to give it to marketing, if they want to give it to a developer that comes directly to council, who knows? But it's there and everybody's getting an increase. So everyone should be happy. And
okay, so what do you need, Travis? Anything?
I believe general consensus of the council's there with 2080, basically the wrestle language as it's been, because there was discussion. Yes, guidance has been talked about here and it can be ongoing. But as far as changes of the 2080 of you shall, no proposed changes there. So I've got distributions of 30, 25, and 45% up to 500,000. And then the remainder would then just be retained as council contingency.
That does seem like the consensus. I just have a question. Do we need to write this contingent on Iowa tax law or Iowa law not changing? I mean, what if the legislature says we can't do this anymore and we've contractually obligated ourselves to doing it?
That's why if we keep it as a percentage of revenues and they take away revenues, we're all up a creek.
Okay. And then I guess my other request would be that if staff had any recommendations for changes that should be made to the language, that you bring them to us as part of this process. I'd like to, get your thoughts.
There was one for possible clarification. I did talk with Stephanie a bit about the 2080 with the core job specifies that it shall be members of the council and the executive committee that should meet to discuss. That's currently being met by the council members participating on the full board. So is council okay with removing that portion of the 2080 and having the council's participation on the full board? meet that requirement.
You mean, so there's an executive committee that doesn't have council on it?
No. That the executive committee of Decorah Jobs, so the chair, vice chair, secretary, that executive committee meets with the council on, I believe, a quarterly basis. And
does it?
It's spelled out in the contract.
Right.
But what's being used to meet the terms of the contract is the quarterly Decorah Jobs meeting that two council members attend.
Yeah, and an additional meeting would just be redundant anyway, I think.
I actually think that would help communication if jobs met with the full
well.
council, if the executive.
No, not full council.
Oh, okay.
The language is an executive committee of jobs plus 2 council representatives meeting quarterly. So now that we have 2 council representatives on jobs.
On the entire board.
And we're there with the entire board. If I felt as if it would be nice for us to have a bigger voice in, I would say that we should keep that language in so that we can get the executives of Decorah Jobs ear a little bit more directly. But again, the organization as it operates listens really well. So
And I would not object to having a 3rd council member either.
I was going to say, are council members voting members of jobs?
Well,
Yes.
currently it's, and the bylaws, I don't want to get into theirs. I'm now a member. I've been to 1 meeting and, but there's 2 council members and the manager that are on the board, but the individuals are tied to them, not the seats themselves. If I remember correct, mine is tied to the seat. Okay.
And they're voting members.
So if the bylaws were to reflect that,
Could you restate that for Zoom? Because I don't think they could hear Steph.
Oh, sorry. Yes. So Stephanie Fromm just commented from the audience that she believes that the 2 council members and myself are named by position instead of by person. And so it would meet that requirement. And then I just talked about if the bylaws could reflect that, then I think that it even better cleans up. So that should, spells out the process of how those council members are chosen.
I like Kirk's idea. I mean, what % of jobs is council, city representative?
It's Travis, Kirk, and I out of a group of maybe 20-ish.
So I guess I do like the idea of a 3rd council member. I mean, in some ways that still stays under 4 and it gives a little bit more percentage of some city voice. But I like that suggestion, Kirk.
Well, it's up to jobs, I think, too. I mean, we'd have to work with them to do that because it's their organization as well. But I don't think it would be bad to have 3 voices from the city. That's just from my experience. I think that it wouldn't hurt.
How do we consider that?
So that's an ask of jobs? Or is that something we do in the 2080 agreement?
We could do it via the 2080 agreement because we have leverage right now. But, I mean, I know it seems like, to me, it seems like it would help with communication. It is sometimes hard to convey
This is
what's
coming
happening.
back, right? We'll be looking at this again. I mean,
But they're going to write it. I think we should ask for a 3rd council seat. Wait. And city manager.
Okay.
So all three people have to report back and actually tell us what's going on.
Yes,
too.
that is true.
Because thank you to Jessica for indicating that there's often a failure to communicate and it's not always on the other end.
I don't think it's ever on their end.
Okay.
I think it is always on council end. I will be honest. I think it is always on council's end.
Okay. Moving right along. Okay.
I think I've got enough. John, anything else you need? No. All right. We'll draft that for the next meeting.
All right. Mayor appointments to Sustainability Commission. I'm recommending Kevin Clusterwill and Jim Tripp.
And move their appointment.
Second.
Motion made by Luce, seconded by Zittigruin. Any discussion? Roll call. Oops, sorry. You have a question?
No, I was just going to say, I think it's great that these residents are interested in going at this. I just think we were wrong in expanding the
Okay.
Commission to appease them. I mean, if anything, we should take the non-residents off the commission and put these folks on, because it's great that folks in town want to get involved.
Non-residents.
I think all of the community.
Yeah, they are residents. They have
all
to
of
be.
the people that are on the sustainability are
Who's not a resident?
citizens.
Andy Johnson.
That's not.
MEU
that's
task force.
sustainability, That's the task force.
That's the task
Yeah,
force.
that's not a.
Isn't that part of
No,
sustainability?
it's not. It's separate.
It's not an ordinance created thing. And that's why there are members from outside. And I think just to reiterate, the reason that there are people outside of the city limits on the MEU task force is because the MEU is looking at something outside of the city limits. So.
Okay. I have a motion and a second. Roll call.
Luce.
Aye.
Zittergruen.
Aye.
Chisel. Neal.
Aye.
Olson.
Aye.
Hadley.
Aye.
Johnson.
Aye.
Motion carried. City manager report.
All right, you'll all be happy to know that most of the perch and walleye in South Dakota are safe. I left them there. So, but back from vacation, but have been keeping an eye on our state legislature.
What are they doing?
Drugs. This is recorded, right? So, couple I want the council to keep aware of. John, I'm gonna ask you to chime in on the civil service one, but an item that's been of discussion of council, HSB 682 talks about licensure changes and Iowa building code establishment.
Yeah, I saw that.
Two parts of it. One would prohibit zoning enforcement if 80% non-conforming. I'm not so concerned about that because if you got 80% non-conforming, maybe that's a problem with zoning code. The second part, though, creates a statewide building code and would prohibit local codes to deviate either direction from it. So more stringent or less stringent. So it would say, this is the state building code. You as a city need to enforce this. Nothing
And they're
more,
going to
nothing
start
less.
paying Greg's wages to do that?
Yeah. Can we,
Yeah, they'll take local option and then give it back to us to pay for them.
Well, they're gonna take
would it
hotel
allow
motel.
for abatement to be built into going above it?
So I believe if we were to put requirements for abatement to go above and beyond, yes, I think that's still fine. But it would take away any discussion from council on what our building codes are going to be.
And what about, would it take, I mean, we're about to have a discussion about how we might be able to modify our building codes to, we wouldn't be able to do that.
Now, as it relates to electrical, plumbing, fire safety, or energy efficiency.
Sounds like another letter.
Sounds like another letter to me.
Coming up stormwater.
Yep, that sounds like another letter to me.
So, yeah, that's one I figured would get some council discussion. Another one, HSB 621 is a morph of the right-of-way management discussion. It did add a positive where it would include fiber as an essential corporate purpose, which is a positive for the city with fiber to the premises being a goal of the council. However, still does restrict the management of right-of-way conduit placement. And also restricts the conduit that the city would put in as far as access of it. I don't want to speculate at all, but I think this one's got enough traction. This one's going to carry through. Because this one, adding it as essential corporate purpose, it's their way of, here, we'll make it easier for you to make fiber happen. But
Without
we're gonna,
funding it.
without funding it. And taking away other aspects that are going to appease those that would be in opposition to otherwise making fiber to the premise easier. So I think that one's got some traction. Another being both in the House and the Senate, House HSB 703, as it relates to civil service, it's actually good. This one's actually good for the city. that it makes it a little easier for our interactions. Go ahead, John, if you want to chime in on that.
So Decorah has to have a civil service commission based on our population, but the population number is based on the 1980 census. And it was any community of 8,000 or over had to have a civil service commission. So now you have some communities in Iowa in 1980, they had under 8,000, and now they might have 30 or 40,000, and they don't have to have a civil service commission. And so this would make it permissive. You don't have to have a civil service commission for a community our size. And this is not to say our civil service commission doesn't do a great job. Larry Stevenson's been on there for many years. We have Steve Rundy and Rhonda Albert. They do a great job, but there are some downsides to having a civil service commission. And a community our size, we might go years before we have to use the civil service commission. And then we might have years where we use the civil service commission multiple times for the hiring process, promotion, but then also for discipline too. So
segue into the next one.
Yeah, so the next one, so the first one, HSB 703, my opinion, good. SF 2278 would add significant challenges to a city in having a civil service commission in raising the bar for discipline employees. There's a couple good parts to this bill. It does make, in my opinion, a discipline hearing before a civil service commission closed session, and that makes sense given this. But it raises the bar as far as actually disciplining a civil service member who appeals to the Civil Service Commission. And some of the things that it adds, it makes the standard, imminently detrimental to the public good to discipline a person, which you might think is a good idea, but it basically makes it a trial. I mean, almost a full-fledged trial to get this. And so it really takes away, it's already not employment at will. Public employees have a certain pre-termination hearing rights. So there already are some rights, and the current civil service law provides some rights for employees. But on top of this, you would have to hire outside counsel for the discipline process. And sometimes we do that anyways, but this would basically make it mandatory. And I think to discharge, it would require unanimous decision of the Civil Service Commission, and they could appeal this to district court, which could award attorney's fees to an employee who the Civil Service Commission says shouldn't have been disciplined. And again, maybe in theory these sound good, but it really adds a significant burden to the process. So anyways, I'll get off my, but fortunately, we don't have to use the discipline process very often. So I'm not trying to say that this is it's something that comes up often, but in my opinion, I'm trying to find how this benefits the whole group, you know, and you wonder sometimes what's the
political move.
What's the story behind it? What's the case?
It's a political move.
Yeah. So civil service are typically law enforcement and fire and public safety related. And yes.
And like I said, there already are extra protections for them under the law, taking them out of what I would call a purely at-will employment situation already.
Okay, and so there have been a couple other doozies, and I don't know if you guys caught wind. It was introduced, but I don't believe it went anywhere. Was a bill, I think, in the House to require municipal and school board elections to both be bipartisan. Again, introduced, but I don't think it went anywhere beyond that. Did you catch wind of that?
No, I saw it come up, but I have not seen it in recent updates about movement.
Mm-hmm.
So you mean, wait, that means we'd run on
So
party,
so
right?
they want us to be running on party
Well, Ross,
in city elections?
City and school board. Yeah.
School board as well.
Yep. So there have been a couple things out there that have really made me scratch my head, but like I said, I don't believe that one has moved past being introduced. But definitely keeping an eye on that one too.
Join me after the meeting at T-Box for the establishment of a new political party in Decorah.
Okay, let's keep going.
That's all I have.
All right, Jerry?
We did receive 5 applications for the 4th position in the office. So Travis, myself, and Greg have gone through them. We'll probably be interviewing 2, if not 3, and hopefully soon.
Are we looking for a lobbyist? Is that right?
State of Iowa approved a few years ago, you can't use public funds for lobbying efforts.
I know.
Okay. Anybody, is that it? Anybody from the department heads want to speak at all? Mike, you're still here. Okay. Let's see, council, let's go this way.
As I mentioned earlier, I sent an email to Travis while he was on vacation, by the way, and Carrie, asking them to put together the comparative data for our salaried employees. And I'm sure they're working on that. And as soon as they have it and we have something to look at, we will meet it to discuss that, as well as our own raises, potential raises.
Probably not our own.
Or for other people who
Other
serve
people's raises.
after us, after we're not elected 2 years from now. We have not.
Okay.
No.
Nothing.
Okay. Steve Zittigren.
I know I'm sure I'm speaking on behalf of everyone here in expressing admiration and appreciation for our fire department for their assistance and walk on. We addressed that at the public safety meeting a bit, but now that there's more people listening on Zoom, they did amazing work. The tower truck and the people who know how to run it and train hard to operate it safely and efficiently and well made a world of difference for our neighbors to the east. That's just a beautiful picture of Decorah and all that government can be. So I was proud to be part of this city that night when I saw those pictures, and glad I wasn't the one having to leave my Super Bowl party. So thanks to those who were willing to go. Our next Decorah jobs meeting is not till March 21st. We only have them a couple times a year. So
Thank you. Steve?
I'll be out of town Thursday and Friday, not back till Monday. Looking forward to the sustainability quiz. Is that what you're giving us, Travis? And our next meeting on the work session on the 28th to finalize that. Nothing else, Mayor.
Thank you.
I will be out of the country starting on Wednesday for 8 days, but
We'll make sure.
Other than that, no.
Have a good trip.
We had a sustainability commission meeting last Wednesday, and the commission is anxiously looking forward to our deliberation about the plan. And I think just the next step in that, I had a couple recommendations. One is either after our meeting on Monday that we ask city staff to essentially compose a priority list of what was talked about, that then we could meet with the Sustainability Commission at their next meeting, as many council members could attend, or we could then just schedule another meeting with a work session. But in my own mind, I don't know if we need a whole council work session to do that, if we've all agreed on the priorities. If at least 2 other council members were willing to come to the commission meeting, it is the 3rd Wednesday, so it'll be March 17th? 17th. So if people were willing to come to that, we could go through the priority list that we had worked out. I guess that would be my recommendation, unless people are like, no, we should all meet with them. And then I miscalculated my dates. So I am gone Monday, but would like to Zoom into the Sustainability Commission. I believe I will have access, but if I am not able, then I will trust my colleagues to look through the rest of the plan, and then I would set up a meeting with you, Travis, to go through their priorities. Okay. The commission did recommend the solar ordinance that we passed tonight, or the PPA agreement. They are anxiously waiting to hear about the finalization of maybe it was Malcolm and downtown recycling pickup. And there was a essentially so many residents signed up for backyard compost bins that they had to close. Essentially, they have pretty much sold out of them, which is fantastic. I forget the number, 200 and 25, what was it, Mayor? An astronomical amount of compost bins will be going into the Decorah area for people to compost. After they get their 2 members, which they are grateful for, given the amount of workload and the fact that I gave them a hint that we hadn't really taken anything out of the plan. And then Jim would like to talk further about some options for the climate action plan and did want to know in our goals, we don't have a specific writing of a climate action plan, but we talked about how 4 of the energy goals are essentially writing a climate action plan. We just don't have it written that direction. So I think Jim just wants a confirmation that we really do want sort of this creation of a climate action plan. And he's got some ideas of revenue stream that can support that writing. So that is out of sustainability. Other than that, I will be also out of town from Thursday to Monday. I echo Steve, thank you much. I can't be more eloquent in thanking our fire department and everyone else who's working hard through these cold winter months. So thank you.
The 16th is the 3rd Wednesday.
Okay, 16.
17th, St. Patrick's Day is Thursday.
Okay, it's been a different meeting. Randy.
I have nothing this evening, Mayor.
Okay. Anything else to come before the council? Motion to adjourn?
Move for adjournment.
That was a productive meeting. So.